Think about the last time you felt your chest tighten before the day even began. Maybe it was the weight of a conversation you didn't want to have, the echo of a betrayal you never deserved, or the silent exhaustion of being stretched too thin for too long. You look fine to the world, but inside you are bleeding energy into places that give nothing back. Stoicism is not a dusty philosophy trapped in ancient books. It is a weapon, a shield, and a compass for navigating the storms of today. It teaches you that while you can't control the winds, you can set your sails with precision. Over the next 10 chapters, you'll learn not just how to stop losing energy, but how to channel it into something unshakable. We'll blend the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus with the insights of modern psychology, showing you how to heal from wounds that others can't see, reclaim your focus, and live with a steady mind in a chaotic world. Part 1: The Hidden Drain, when silence costs you more than speaking. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca's words may seem simple, but when you stop and truly feel them, they pierce deep. You know this truth because you've lived it, those moments when you stayed quiet to keep the peace, when you bit your tongue while your instincts screamed, when you told yourself it wasn't worth the trouble. At first, it feels like you're being wise, avoiding conflict, conserving energy, but over time, something subtle happens. You notice you're waking up more tired, your patience thinner, your mind heavier. That's because every unspoken truth and every boundary you fail to hold becomes a slow leak in your soul. Modern psychology calls this emotional suppression, and it's one of the most common ways people bleed out their energy without realizing it. When you suppress too much, your body stays in a low-level stress state. Your mind becomes an overfilled container, always moments away from spilling over. And this isn't just theory, the research shows it damages your health, your focus, even your sense of self-worth. Marcus Aurelius faced this same tension in a much harsher world. As emperor, he couldn't afford to speak every truth or confront every insult, but he also knew the cost of letting rot spread in silence. His solution was not to explode in anger, nor to disappear into passivity, but to cut off what drained him at the root. He understood that peace is not simply the absence of conflict, it is the presence of clarity. And clarity comes when you can tell the difference between a fight worth your time and a weight you must drop. Think of Princess Diana in her final years before leaving the royal family. For years, she endured relentless pressure, judgment, and betrayal, often staying silent to protect appearances. But that silence cost her emotionally, physically, spiritually. When she finally began to speak openly, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, she reclaimed her life. The moment she stopped offering herself up to a system that drained her, her presence transformed. The world saw her not as a victim, but as a force. The Stoics would remind you that it's not the outside noise that weakens you, it's how much of it you allow inside. Energy leaks aren't always dramatic betrayals or toxic relationships. Sometimes they are the daily micro-compromises you make with your own integrity. You say yes when your gut says no. You keep company with people who make you smaller. You give them your listening ear, your emotional labor, your time, and they give you nothing back but more weight to carry. Psychologically, every time you betray your own instincts, you reinforce a dangerous belief: my needs don't matter. And the more that belief takes root, the harder it becomes to stand your ground when it truly matters. The Stoic solution isn't to fight every battle, that's just another form of exhaustion. Instead, it's to become ruthless about where your energy flows. Here's your practice. Over the next week, notice when your body tenses before you agree to something. Pay attention to the heaviness that comes after certain interactions. Then, without announcement or explanation, begin to close those doors. You don't owe anyone an exit speech. You don't have to justify why you're stepping back. Your silence will be answer enough, but this time, It will be a silence that protects rather than depletes you. When you start to guard your energy in this way, you'll feel the shift. At first, some will notice your absence and demand answers. Others will try to guilt you back into old patterns. But like Seneca advised, the opinions of those who take more than they give should be weighed as lightly as dust. Your job is not to keep them comfortable, it's to keep yourself whole. Energy once lost. It is hard to reclaim, but when you stop the leaks, when you hold the line on what truly matters, something powerful happens. You no longer wake up dreading the day. You rise knowing your fire will burn for what you choose, not what others demand. And that is when silence stops being a cost and starts being a shield. Part 2: the discipline of choosing your battles. In the noise and speed of modern life, it can feel as though you're under constant attack by opinions, judgments, and provocations that seem to demand an instant response. Social media algorithms reward outrage. The news thrives on your emotional investment. Even in personal conversations, there's pressure to react quickly, defend yourself, and prove your worth. But Stoicism offers a quieter, a sharper form of strength, the discipline to decide which battles are worthy of your time and which are simply bait. Epictetus, the once-enslaved Stoic who became one of the most respected teachers of his time, gave his students a simple but piercing instruction. If someone speaks badly of you, lie so that none will believe it. He wasn't telling them to pretend they didn't care. He was giving them a strategy to replace defensiveness with proof through action. This principle aligns with what modern psychology calls ego depletion, the recognition that your willpower is a limited resource. Every time you enter an argument that doesn't matter, or try to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you spend mental energy you could have used to make meaningful progress in your own life. When you don't choose your battles, you burn out. You feel as though the world is exhausting you, but in truth, you've been scattering your energy into places that yield nothing in return. Marcus Aurelius, despite being Emperor of Rome, understood this. He could have spent his reign swatting down personal attacks, defending his reputation, or punishing those who spread rumors. But he often refused to respond to such provocations, directing his attention instead toward governing wisely and preparing the empire for its future. He knew that energy spent on petty slights was energy stolen from greater responsibilities. A modern example of this discipline is Michelle Obama. As First Lady, she endured years of relentless and often personal criticism. She could have met every insult with a counterpunch, every false story with a rebuttal. Instead, she embraced the philosophy of going high when they go low. She channeled her energy into initiatives that mattered to her: education, healthy eating, and supporting military families. Her silence was not passive, it was a deliberate act of conservation. She didn't let her critics dictate the terms of her engagement, and over time, her restraint became a hallmark of her dignity. People remember the work she did, not the insults hurled at her. The danger of reacting to everything is that it makes you predictable. Anyone who wants to control your emotions learns that all they need to do is poke your pride and you'll dance to their tune. By choosing your battles, you become harder to manipulate. You create uncertainty in your opponents, making them think twice before provoking you. This is the same wisdom found in martial arts. The most dangerous fighter is not the one who throws the most punches, but the one who holds back until the precise moment their strike will matter. This doesn't mean you never respond, it means you respond better. You replace knee-jerk reactions with intentional, calculated actions. Sometimes, the wisest move is to let a stranger's rude comment dissolve into silence. Sometimes it's to ignore the unfair email from a coworker because the bigger win lies in maintaining your composure. And sometimes it's to engage fully and fiercely when the issue at hand is about your values, your work, or the well-being of those you love. Psychologists talk about the importance of response latency, the pause between stimulus and response. The longer this pause, the greater your control over your reaction. This is where Stoic wisdom breathes, in that pause. You have the chance to ask yourself, is this worth it? Is this the hill I want to die on? The vast majority of the time, the answer will be no. And in that no, you find not weakness, but peace. Choosing your battles is not about retreat, it's about strategy. It is the recognition that every battle fought has a cost, and your energy is a currency that should be spent with intention. Your silence, when chosen consciously, can be the loudest statement you make. It says, I decide what matters to me. You don't. And in a world that wants to pull you into every argument, that kind of self-mastery is the truest victory you can claim. Part 3: Mastery over your inner judge. There's a voice in your head that never stops talking. Sometimes it's a cheerleader telling you that you're capable and resilient. Other times it's a harsh critic, quick to remind you of every mistake, every weakness, every failure. In moments of struggle, this voice can grow so loud that it drowns out all other perspectives. The Stoics understood this inner judge well. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, repeatedly wrote reminders to himself not to be ruled by distorted self-perception. He understood that most suffering comes not from the events themselves, but from the judgment we attach to them. Modern psychology calls this cognitive distortion, the brain's tendency to misinterpret reality in ways that feed anxiety, self-doubt, and shame. If you constantly filter your experiences through thoughts like I always fail or I'm not good enough, you create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your brain begins to scan for evidence to confirm this belief, ignoring anything that might contradict it. The Stoic way isn't to silence the inner voice entirely, but to train it, to replace rash, emotional judgments with reasoned, fair-minded assessments. Consider the life of Misty Copeland, the first African-American principal ballerina at the American Ballet Theatre. When she began dancing at age 13, an age considered late in ballet, she was told she didn't have the right body type, that she'd never fit into the mold of a traditional ballerina. Those criticisms could have become her inner narrative, limiting her before she even began. Instead, she reframed them. She used reason, not emotion, to assess whether the criticism was valid. She trained relentlessly, sought mentors, and turned her differences into strengths. By mastering her inner judge, she was able to defy centuries of rigid tradition and redefine the image of a principal ballerina. From a Stoic standpoint, the lesson is clear. The mind is not an unbiased observer, it's a storyteller. Your job is to ensure that the story it tells is truthful, balanced, and useful. This is where the Stoic practice of epoch, withholding judgment, comes in. You learn to pause before forming conclusions, to ask yourself, do I know this for certain? Am I seeing the whole picture? The more you practice this, the less you are at the mercy of your mind's exaggerations. Psychologically, this overlaps with cognitive restructuring, a core element of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. You learn to identify distorted thoughts, challenge their validity, and replace them with more accurate ones. Over time, your brain rewires itself toward a more balanced perspective, reducing emotional reactivity and increasing clarity. The practical takeaway is simple. You must become both the defendant and the judge in your own mental courtroom. When the inner critic makes a claim you're going to fail, treat it like evidence in a trial. Ask, where's the proof? Is there an alternative explanation? What would I say to a friend in this situation? This deliberate process shifts you from reactive self-judgment to proactive self-management. Once you master this, external criticism loses much of its sting. You become less dependent on praise for confidence and less shaken by blame. You stop living under the constant pressure of proving yourself to others. Because you know the only judgment that truly matters is the one you pass on yourself, and even that is handled with fairness, patience, and reason. In time, your inner judge transforms from a tyrant into a trusted guide, one that holds you accountable without crushing your spirit. When you reach that point, you don't just survive challenges, you grow stronger because of them. You no longer fear mistakes because you know they will be weighed honestly, not exaggerated into personal catastrophes. And that is the quiet power the Stoics wanted you to have. The ability to govern your own mind so completely that no unfair verdict, internal or external, can break you. Part 4: The Fortress Within, Guarding Your Inner Citadel. The Stoics often spoke of an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind where no enemy can reach you unless you open the gates. Marcus Aurelius described it as the one place that remains untouched by chaos, betrayal, or the noise of the world. When you live by this principle, you realize that your true security doesn't depend on circumstances, but on the strength of your inner defenses. It's about protecting the sanctity of your thoughts, guarding the mental space where your values and self-respect reside. In today's world, the threats to your citadel are rarely invading armies. They're more subtle: an offhand insult from a coworker, a disappointing message from someone you trusted, or the drip feed of bad news and negativity online. These things creep past your guard if you're not vigilant. The Stoics understood this centuries before the age of social media. You are not harmed by events themselves, but by the meaning you assign to them. Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When you grasp this, you begin to see that keeping your citadel intact means controlling the interpretation, not the event. Modern psychology backs this up through the concept of cognitive appraisal, the idea that your emotional response is shaped not by the external trigger, but by your assessment of it. Two people can face the same challenge, and one will crumble while the other stands firm. The difference lies in mental framing. Psychologists have found that when you actively reframe a negative event, seeing it as temporary, limited in scope, or even an opportunity for growth, your stress levels drop, your resilience increases, and your problem-solving improves. This isn't blind optimism, it's strategic perception. Consider the example of tennis champion Serena Williams. Across her career, she faced intense public scrutiny, personal losses, and physical injuries that could have ended her dominance. Yet she maintained an unshakable mental strength, often speaking about how she focuses only on what she can control: her preparation, her effort, her attitude, and blocks out the noise. In her most challenging moments, she didn't let opponents or critics dictate her mindset. Her inner citadel remained intact because she decided what entered it and what did not. That decision made all the difference between being derailed by setbacks and using them as fuel. For you, guarding your citadel starts with recognizing the gates, the points where external events enter your mind. This might be the moment you open a news app, read a comment online, or listen to gossip. Each time you have a choice: let it in unfiltered, or pause and assess whether it deserves space in your thoughts. Stoicism teaches you to practice a mental checkpoint. Does this align with my values? Will it matter a year from now? If not, it's nothing but noise. And noise has no place in the fortress. Guarding your citadel also means strengthening the walls. This involves daily habits that fortify your mind: morning reflection to set intentions, journaling to clarify your thoughts, and physical exercise to keep your body, the foundation of your mental resilience, in peak condition. These habits are your stone and mortar, making it harder for distractions or insults to breach your defenses. Even a fortress requires maintenance. Neglect it and the walls crumble. But perhaps the most important element is remembering that the citadel is not a place to hide. It's a command center, not an escape bunker. The goal isn't to retreat from life, but to engage with it from a position of strength. When you know your mind is protected, you can face challenges without fear of being broken. You can be generous without being naive, courageous without being reckless, and compassionate without being exploited. The practical takeaway is simple yet powerful. Treat your mind like sacred ground. Be selective about what you allow inside. Just as you wouldn't leave your home unlocked for strangers to walk in, don't leave your thoughts unguarded for negativity to take root. When you master this discipline, external chaos loses its power over you. You move through life knowing that no matter how loud the world gets, the most important part of you remains untouchable. Because once you understand the value of your inner citadel, you realize that the only way someone can truly harm you is if you hand them the key. Part 5, the fortress of your mind. There comes a time when you realize that no one can truly protect you but yourself, not in a cynical way, but in a way that acknowledges the boundaries of human connection. Friends, mentors, and loved ones can offer guidance, comfort, and support, but they cannot stand watch inside your mind. That is your territory alone, and if you don't fortify it, the world will. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that other people's opinions and actions were beyond his control, yet his inner judgments were always his responsibility. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This was not just philosophical poetry, it was a survival strategy. A mind left unguarded becomes a playground for the fears, insecurities, and manipulations of others. But a mind fortified with reason, clarity, and principle becomes an unshakable fortress. Modern psychology echoes this idea through the concept of psychological boundaries. A boundary isn't a wall to keep the world out, it's a filter to decide what you allow in. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, teaches that intrusive thoughts, harmful narratives, and emotional manipulation only gain power if we grant them residence. If someone tries to plant a seed of doubt or resentment in you, you can either nurture it until it grows into a tangle of anxiety, or you can calmly decline to let it take root. This mental gatekeeping is not coldness, it's clarity. Take the example of Serena Williams, one of the greatest athletes in history. Throughout her career, she has faced relentless criticism, unfair scrutiny, and attempts to undermine her confidence. Yet she consistently showed an ability to keep her mental focus intact. In interviews, she has spoken about visualizing her goals, repeating affirmations, and refusing to let her opponent's mind games infiltrate her concentration. This wasn't denial, it was discipline. She built her mind into a space where distractions couldn't dictate her performance. You too can practice this. Each day ask yourself, what thoughts am I entertaining that do not serve me? When someone criticizes you unfairly, instead of reacting defensively, you can assess whether their words have merit. If they don't, let them pass like wind through an open gate. If they do, integrate them without self-condemnation. The fortress of your mind doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means holding power over how reality shapes you. The danger is subtle. Without awareness, you start internalizing other people's emotional states, absorbing their fears, adopting their anger, or mirroring their cynicism. Before long, your mental space is no longer your own. The Stoics would call this living according to someone else's logos, surrendering your reason to another's. The antidote is deliberate mental sovereignty. You decide what influences enter, and you decide how they are interpreted. This doesn't mean isolation. Just as a fortress has gates that open to friends and allies, your mind can welcome wisdom, compassion, and shared joy. The key is intention. You open the gates when it's right, not because someone pounds on them. Practical application is simple, though not easy. Begin by noticing your triggers, people, topics, or situations that consistently unsettle you. Prepare a mental response in advance so you're not caught off guard. Practice pausing before reacting, allowing your reason to filter your emotions. When someone tries to provoke you, imagine your mind as a calm, guarded courtyard. They can shout at the walls, but they can't reach you without your permission. The truth is, an unguarded mind is an open invitation to chaos, but a well-kept mind, ruled by principle rather than impulse, is a source of lasting peace. This is the essence of Stoic resilience, knowing that while the world can storm at your gates, the fortress within remains yours alone. Part 6. The strength of letting go. You have been told since childhood that holding on is a sign of strength, that persistence is a virtue, and in many cases it is. But the Stoics remind you of a more subtle, often counterintuitive truth. Sometimes your greatest display of strength is in letting go. Seneca once wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." You carry around mental burdens, grudges, regrets, and failed dreams as if they were part of your identity. But they are not. They are weights you choose to hold, and you can choose to release them. From the standpoint of modern psychology, attachment is often rooted in a fear of uncertainty. We cling to situations, relationships, or self-images because letting go means stepping into the unknown. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches that this fear distorts your perception, making you believe that without these attachments, you will be less safe, less whole. The truth is, the human brain is remarkably adaptive. It rewires itself when given space to heal. Just as a wound needs air to close, your mind needs space free from unnecessary burdens to function at its best. This is where the Stoics align with modern neuroscience. Marcus Aurelius taught himself to treat each day as a fresh slate, writing in Meditations that you have power over your mind, not outside events. The act of letting go is not surrender in the sense of defeat. It is surrender in the sense of choosing not to be ruled by what you cannot control. This distinction is critical. You are not running away, you are creating room to move forward. Consider the life of Maya Angelou. She endured trauma, racism, and public criticism, yet she built a career of remarkable depth as a poet, singer, and civil rights activist. One of her most powerful life choices was her willingness to shed labels and expectations others placed on her. She moved fluidly from art to activism, from music to literature, never allowing herself to be imprisoned by one identity or past hardship. Letting go of what the world told her she should be allowed her to become more than anyone expected. When you refuse to let go, you make yourself a prisoner of what was. This robs you of what could be. Imagine walking through life with a fist clenched tightly around a pebble. Your hand cannot grasp anything new until you release it. In the same way, your mind cannot grasp new opportunities while it is occupied holding on to old wounds. Letting go may mean ending a relationship that is comfortable but stagnant, forgiving someone who has wronged you so their shadow no longer follows you, or abandoning a goal that no longer aligns with who you are becoming. The Stoics would tell you that the past is not your enemy, it is your teacher. The purpose of looking back is to learn, not to live there. Modern research on emotional resilience echoes this. Those who practice acceptance and detachment from the uncontrollable recover from stress and loss faster. Detachment here is not coldness, it is clarity. You stop trying to bend the past into a shape that serves you and instead focus on shaping your present. Letting go is not a single act, it is a discipline. Some days you will feel the old weight trying to return, like a tide pulling back in. That is natural. The key is to recognize the pull without letting it sweep you away. This is why the Stoics practiced daily reflection, writing, meditating, repeating truths, so they could reinforce the choice to release what does not serve them. If you adopt this practice, you will find that letting go is not the loss you once feared. It is the gain you never expected, of freedom, of energy, of space for what truly matters. And you will finally see that the most unshakable calm often comes, not from holding on tighter, but from opening your hand. Part 7, the courage to walk alone. There will come moments when you stand at a crossroads, knowing that whichever direction you choose, someone will disapprove. Sometimes that someone will be a stranger. Sometimes it will be a friend, a mentor, or even a loved one. In those moments, the easiest option is to bend, to soften your stance, dilute your principles, and keep the peace. But the Stoics remind us, peace purchased at the cost of your integrity is not peace at all. Epictetus warned his students that if they truly sought improvement, they should be prepared for mockery, suspicion, even abandonment. The path of self-mastery and principle will often be misunderstood, and that misunderstanding may not come from enemies. It may come from those who care about you but cannot see the world through your eyes. This is why the greatest test of courage isn't fighting an open enemy. It's standing firm in your convictions when the people you value most question or reject them. Modern psychology reveals why this is so hard. Social rejection activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. Our ancestors depended on the tribe for survival, so acceptance became deeply wired into our instincts. Disapproval once meant danger, but in the modern world, that wiring can betray us. When we allow the need for approval to dictate our choices, we hand over the steering wheel of our lives to other people's moods, biases, and fears. We become prisoners, bound not by chains, but by the invisible leash of public opinion. Walking alone does not mean cultivating arrogance or rejecting all counsel. It means rooting your identity in values that cannot be bought, flattered, or intimidated. It means being willing to endure the discomfort of disapproval rather than betray yourself. Consider the example of Rosa Parks on December 1, 1955. She was not a physically imposing figure. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten or attack. She simply remained seated on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, refusing to surrender her spot to a white passenger. That act was not a sudden flash of rebellion. It was the product of years of quiet conviction. She understood the consequences: public humiliation, arrest, and possible violence. But she also understood something deeper, that moving from that seat would mean conceding a part of her dignity, and for her, that cost was too high. This is the courage Stoicism demands, the courage to accept isolation if the alternative is self-betrayal. You may lose friends, jobs, or opportunities. You may feel the sting of being misunderstood or misrepresented. Yet what you gain is far more precious: the ability to meet your own gaze in the mirror and know you have not bartered away your integrity for comfort. The first steps on this path can feel crushingly lonely. The silence after you've disappointed someone can be deafening, but if you stay the course, something shifts. You start hearing another voice, the quiet, steady compass inside you that says this is right. That voice grows stronger with every decision you make in alignment with your principles. And once you've learned to trust it, solitude transforms from something you fear into something you value. In time, you realize you are not truly alone at all. You are walking in the company of countless others across centuries and cultures who chose principle over popularity. The philosophers who spoke truth to emperors, the artists who defied censors, the everyday people who refused to compromise their values for convenience. Their paths intersect with yours in spirit, even if the road feels empty. The takeaway is simple but demanding. Stop weighing your decisions on the scale of approval when you feel the pull to please everyone. Pause and ask, what is the cost of betraying my values here? If the price is your integrity, that price is too high. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. Let the silence settle if it must. Sometimes the most powerful step you can take is the one you take alone, because that step is the one that proves beyond doubt that your life belongs to you. Part 8: The freedom of letting go. From the moment we're old enough to understand ambition, the world tells us that life is about adding more possessions, more achievements, more influence, more proof that we're winning. We're told to climb, to grasp, to hold, and for a while it feels right. The more we accumulate, the more secure we believe we'll feel. But somewhere along the way, the weight begins to show. The very things we thought would set us free become the anchors that keep us tethered. The Stoics saw through this illusion centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the most powerful empire in the world, wrote not about conquering lands, but about conquering the mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This is the quiet revolution of Stoicism, that true power is not about controlling everything around you, but about letting go of the need to do so. Letting go doesn't mean giving up on life or abandoning ambition. It means breaking the chain between your happiness and outcomes you cannot control. It means understanding that while you can influence events, you can never own them. Modern psychology calls this cognitive diffusion, the ability to step back from your thoughts, desires, and fears, seeing them for what they are, passing mental weather. Some days bring sunshine. Others bring storms, but you are not the sky. The more you practice letting go, the less you're yanked around by the constant pull of what if and it must be this way. This detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. You stop chasing the illusion that every detail must align perfectly for you to feel whole. You begin to see that control was never the goal, peace was. Consider the life of Keanu Reeves, in an industry addicted to image and excess. He moves with quiet humility. He rides the subway. He donates millions to film crew members and hospitals without publicizing it. He's endured profound loss, the death of his child, the passing of his partner, the loss of his best friend, yet he does not walk through life bitter. He does not rage at fate. Instead, he seems to embody the Stoic principle of amor fati, the love of fate. He accepts that life will take as much as it gives. And that dignity comes not from resisting this truth, but from flowing with it. This is the paradox of letting go. The less you clutch at things, the more space you create for peace to enter. You stop trying to edit every twist in your story and instead learn to read it as it unfolds. The present moment stops feeling like a waiting room for the real life that begins when everything finally goes your way. Instead, the present moment becomes the reward. When you no longer demand that life match your exact script, you become strangely untouchable. Disappointment loses its teeth. Setbacks become scenes rather than verdicts. You stop seeing change as a threat and start seeing it as a natural rhythm. The Stoics would say that this is the ultimate kind of freedom, the ability to move through life without being owned by it. You can still dream, you can still strive, but you no longer chain your joy to the outcome. The winds may change, but your course remains steady because you steer from within. Here's a simple practice. The next time you feel that tightness in your chest, the urge to force a plan, a person or a project to turn out exactly as you've imagined, pause. Ask yourself, if this slips from my grasp, will I still be me? The answer will always be yes, and that yes is a reminder that letting go is not the same as losing. Letting go is choosing to carry only what is yours to carry. It's refusing to be weighed down by what you cannot keep. When you live this way, life feels lighter. The world remains unpredictable. But your peace no longer depends on its predictability, and that, the Stoics would say, is real power. Part 9. The freedom of letting go. You often believe that holding on is a sign of strength. You tell yourself that if you grip tightly, whether to a relationship, a job, a goal, or even a grievance, you are showing commitment, loyalty, and perseverance. But the Stoics saw it differently. They taught that true freedom often comes not from clinging, but from letting go. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This wasn't just moral guidance. It was a reminder that what you release can be as important as what you embrace. In psychology, this principle aligns closely with the concept of cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt your thinking and behavior when circumstances change. The more rigidly you hold on to old patterns or ideas, the more trapped you become. But when you release what no longer serves you, you create space for growth, peace, and better decisions. Letting go isn't about weakness, it's about creating the mental bandwidth to focus on what matters now. Consider the journey of Malala Yousafzai. After surviving an assassination attempt for advocating girls' education, she had every reason to harbor bitterness toward her attackers. Instead, she let go of personal resentment, channeling her energy into advocacy and education for millions worldwide. By releasing the need for vengeance, she amplified her impact and maintained her inner peace. She understood that what you carry in your heart shapes the life you live. The Stoics would see Malala's choice as a model of emotional discipline. Epictetus often reminded his students that we control our judgments and responses, not external events. Holding on to anger or disappointment keeps you chained to the past. Letting go breaks those chains, allowing you to move forward unburdened. Modern neuroscience even supports this. Research on rumination shows that dwelling on negative experiences prolongs stress responses, while intentional release promotes psychological resilience. Letting go also applies to the ambitions and identities you've outgrown. Many people live in silent misery because they are still chasing a dream they chose 10 years ago, ignoring that their values and desires have shifted. Seneca's wisdom, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end," reminds you that endings are not failures, but necessary openings for transformation. When you release something, whether it's an unhealthy relationship, an unrealistic expectation, or a role that no longer fits, you are not abandoning your principles, you are honoring them. You're acknowledging that your worth is not tied to any single possession, achievement, or opinion. You become lighter, more present, and far less controlled by fear. Your practice is simple but not easy. Identify what in your life is costing you peace without bringing proportionate value. This could be a toxic friendship, a job that drains your spirit, or even a belief about yourself that no longer reflects who you've become. Then, with deliberate courage, loosen your grip. Letting go isn't the same as giving up. It is an active choice to step out of the mental prison you've built, to redirect your focus to what is alive, meaningful, and within your control. And in doing so, you embody one of the most liberating truths in Stoicism. Freedom is not found in holding everything, but in holding only what's worth keeping. Part 10. The circle you choose shapes the life you live. You cannot underestimate the silent but powerful influence of the people you allow into your life. Stoics understood that character is not only shaped from within, it is also molded by the company you keep. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and often those colors are borrowed from those around you." Modern psychology echoes this truth through the concept of emotional contagion, the unconscious transfer of mood, mindset, and behavior between people. Simply put, you begin to think, feel, and act like the people you spend the most time with. This is why your inner circle is not just a social choice, it's a moral and strategic one. If you surround yourself with those who live with discipline, you'll feel a natural pull toward order. If you keep company with the lazy, dishonest, or bitter, their shadows will eventually seep into your own habits. The Stoics would have you consider friendship not as entertainment, but as a mutual pact for virtue. History offers a vivid example in the life of Malala Yousafzai. After surviving an assassination attempt for advocating girls' education, she could have easily retreated into isolation. Instead, she deliberately chose to surround herself with courageous, principled allies, people who not only shared her values but challenged her to push them further. That circle amplified her voice, helping her transform personal tragedy into a global movement for education and justice. Her journey reflects the Stoic truth: you become braver by keeping company with the brave. In contrast, many lives unravel because of misplaced loyalty to toxic people. You may recognize it in your own life: the friend who encourages your worst impulses, the colleague who normalizes cutting corners, the partner who subtly erodes your confidence. These influences rarely feel dangerous at first. Like slow poison, their effects appear only when the damage has already taken root. The Stoic remedy is simple, though not easy. Remove yourself from such company, or at the very least, shield your mind from adopting their patterns. Modern research on social norms makes the same case in scientific language. We are wired to mimic those around us, even without noticing. That's why athletes train with those better than themselves, and writers join circles of disciplined peers. It's not about copying, it's about rising to the level of your environment. If your current circle makes mediocrity feel normal, it's time to widen the gate to your life. The Stoics would tell you, friendship is not measured by years known but by virtues shared. Seek companions who strengthen your sense of justice, your patience under stress, your courage in the face of fear. Let go of the illusion that you can keep close company with destructive people without being shaped by them. The reality is, you either lift each other up or pull each other down. There is no neutral ground. Your practical step begins with an honest audit. List the 5 people you interact with most. Ask yourself, do they challenge you to grow or make it easier to shrink? Do they model self-control, kindness, and integrity? Or do they pull you into pettiness, envy, and distraction? You don't need to exile people from your life with cruelty, but you do need to consciously adjust the influence they have over you. Spend more time with those who embody what you aspire to, and limit time with those who feed what you wish to leave behind. Remember, your circle is not a mirror, it's a map. It doesn't just reflect who you are, it shapes where you're headed. Choose with the same care you would for your own thoughts, for they are more connected than you imagine. In the quiet mathematics of character, you are the average of the souls you let closest. And that average is writing your future, one shared conversation. One subtle influence, one silent moment at a time. In the end, the journey to an unshakable mind is not built in a single moment, but through the quiet discipline of daily choices. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This is the timeless core of Stoicism. Your peace does not depend on the world, but on the fortress you build within. So as you step back into your life after this video, carry this truth with you. When challenges come, and they will, pause, breathe, and choose your response with intention. Let your words be measured, your actions deliberate, and your heart steady, no matter the storm. If this message has sparked something in you, I encourage you to not just listen, but to live it. Start today. Make one small choice that reflects the person you want to be. If you found value here, consider subscribing to Unshakable Calm for more Stoic wisdom blended with modern insights. And I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your calm is your power. Protect it.